Hey, good morning, David.
Morning, Ian. How you doing?
I'm all right. It's Monday morning and the kids are
Yeah,
back at school, but they're not back at school. They're in the house
yeah,
back at school. So I
yeah.
think it was mixed blessing. They didn't have to go to school, but they can't sit and do what they want to do all day. They've got to do something else. So we said here we are, Unplanners episode 4. We're going to talk a bit about Agile because I think Agile means different things to different people. It gets banded around. We've got Agile as a methodology, haven't we? And then we just got Agile as we talk about the importance of being agile in the Unplanners toolbox. And just up on the wall behind me here, I've got a very simple, easy definition of agile: the ability to move quickly and easily. Quickly and easily. Yeah. How important is that speed thing, do you think, David, when it comes to unplanning, to move quickly?
Make your decisions quickly and change them, if ever at all, slowly. That's what I read somewhere. I think it was maybe Napoleon Hill, and he may have been quoting someone else, but it's always kind of stuck with me that when you instinctively know what the decision should be, we're quite often afraid to just go with that gut instinct and make that move and make it happen. We start imagining all the things that could go wrong and all the things we won't be able to do. So you make that decision quickly. Speed is incredibly important because, as a friend of mine once said, if you can think of something, then someone is already doing it. I mean, isn't that amazing? In this modern world, he said, Michael Fenton, he said to me, in this modern world, if you can think of it, somebody's doing it. So speed is important. But speed of decision making and taking action is difficult.
Mm.
That's not easy.
Mm.
Because as soon as you start doing it, as soon as you start unpacking that thing that needs speed, then you uncover every reason why you shouldn't be doing it, or you could stop, or you could fail, or what could go wrong. That's why I say make decisions quickly and change them, if ever at all, slowly. So if you make the decision to do it, go with it, and don't deviate at the first obstacle.
Yeah, I think for me, I have a mixed relationship with speed. I think as a younger man, I was always like coming up with an idea, executing on it straight away. I'll do that, I'll do that, I'll do this. And sometimes I think my execution might have been a bit sloppy, but I did it. So better to try it and do it sloppily than not at all, or perhaps. I think as I've matured a bit, sometimes I think I've stepped into thinking, being a bit more considered, and maybe slowing down a bit. But I do know from my experiences that often it is the speed of reaction to something, to reach out to someone, to go, I just saw this happened, this might be useful, what do you think?
Yeah.
I know that wins opportunities and opens doors for me. And to your earlier point of your friend, if you're thinking about it, someone else is already acting on it. So I find there's I kind of reconcile these two things about being considered and being smart as I step into my midlife, and at the same time, not being rapid for the sake of it, but knowing sometimes you have got to be that first to go out there, or that first to approach. Because if you just sit on the idea forever, I mean, if we had sat on this idea forever and said, let's do this little series, the Unplanned, and so should we do it in a few weeks? But we didn't do that, did we? We said, let's just do it and see what happens. And I think speed is really important.
And you talked about that it could be considered sloppy. Back then, sloppy is now called minimal viable product. Yeah? You're just testing it. And that's where speed really comes in. You can then get the immediate feedback, the feel. And you have to, I think a lot of it's about listening to yourself. If you have a gut feeling you should reach out to someone, as you talked about, and do it now, listen to yourself as you're writing that first email to them, or that LinkedIn connection invite. Is it still making sense? And then you can kind of test it and make sure that actually, yeah, I should be reaching out to this person. Am I going to press send? Maybe I want to give it a couple of minutes, have a cup of tea before I press send. That's not really slowing down. That's still acting quickly compared to what normally happens, which is you have an idea to do something and then you put it on a list, and 3 days later it's working its way down the list, and it's going to drop off and never happen. And then you go, I should have reached out to that guy. I could, maybe, and it's gone. That's the other argument, isn't it? You missed the boats completely.
Yeah, I think if we want to talk about being opportunistic and being entrepreneurial, I think it's about spotting opportunities and going for it straight away, because how many other people might be a bit ahead of you? And if it goes on a to-do list and I'll do that tomorrow, then it's probably, it's probably not worth it.
So the ability to move quickly and easily, that's agility. And it's not just about always moving quickly. It's the ability to be able to move quickly. It's not just everything I see in front of me I'll move quickly towards. I'm not a crazed magpie searching for something shiny out in the garden. It is considered. And some of the questions I ask myself before I'll do something that others may look at me and go, wow, you just did that, is, do I have any talent in that space that I think I can draw upon? Do I have any experience? Do I have any people I can turn to who can help me on that journey? And those are all helping me make the quick decision.
I like that. And I think I was coaching someone last week on one of my video call coaching sessions. And a lot of work that he does, he's in the US, a lot of work that he does has been in-person events, emceeing and hosting things. And now those things aren't happening anymore. I was helping him think about other ideas. But what I said to him, I think, was something I said to you on our first episode, which was something I'd heard on a webinar, which is the things you have been good at are the things you are good at. And I think, to your point, I think unplanning in this current stage, if you're watching or listening to this and thinking about how you can embrace the spirit of unplanning to find your next chapter in your story, in your career, I think on the one hand, it's being about open-minded and looking what's going on and being prepared to be plural. But to your point, it's not just going for literally everything. You've got to be aware of, the things you have been good at is what you are good at, and using that as a building block to follow opportunities. We talked about the unifier, haven't we, in some of our books, about that common thread that goes through your career. And I think that's important with unplanning. It's not about going in a toy store and saying, oh, I'll have a bit of this, and I'll take anything that looks shiny and seductive. It's about making sure that what you're pursuing aligns with who you are and what you stand for, I suppose.
And everything, we only have a sphere that is so big, each one of us, yeah? I can't see 300, I can't see the things that I can't see. I'm not aware of the things I'm not aware of. So I can't chase those things. So the things that interest me are in my sphere. Yeah. And they're the things that I'm more likely to go towards. So I probably wouldn't be drawn towards opening a diamond mine, because I've never been to one. I know nothing about them. I don't know operationally how they work, but I'm sure diamonds are very beautiful. And it kind of stops there. It's not in my vision. It's not in my sphere of consciousness. But the things that are the things that I value and you value. And each one of the people watching this now, the things that are in your sphere that you could be heading for are probably things that you value. And that, I think, is also really important, is to know what you do value. What are your values? Because when your values align with what you're doing, the thing you are doing becomes much easier, becomes much more focused. All your energy, huge amounts of energy can be poured into something you're passionate about versus something that you don't really want to do. And we all are aware of that. So when your values align with your pursuits, then you'll find yourself moving in that direction. And the speed is about the speed of identifying and quickly evaluating if this is something you should move towards. I guess part of that evaluation list should be, do I have any values? Diamonds I don't, there's not a value to me. But other things are. Technology is. Innovation is a huge motivator for me and a real value. So when anything happens in the innovation space, I'm very aware that I'm a little bit of a magpie and I'll move towards it. That doesn't mean I'll chase it all the way down and try and make it my income source. I may just read about it out of interest.
But you have alignment with it. I sometimes think about unplanning is a bit like traveling without a detailed map. But you can't do a journey without a map. You need something. And I say to do a journey without a map, you need a compass so you know where you're headed. And I think what the compass is about for me is about being really aware of what your values are, of being in alignment with who you are and what makes you tick. And if you follow that, I often say the North Star is like following me and all I am, then I can't go wrong. So if I use that to navigate all this uncertainty and all this opportunity, a bit like you. So if innovation's on my North Star, it's not, but it's on your North Star, you'll get magnetized to that, and that's somewhere you'll want to go. And I think that sounds a useful way of looking at it for me. And I guess that's how we have both navigated our careers. We met in 1994 or 1995, might have been a bit earlier, when we were both working in the radio production industry. And I know a lot of people, if we look them up now on LinkedIn or we kept in touch with them, a lot of people have stayed in that vertical. 25, 26 years on, they're still in the radio production space. And I think what you and I have done, perhaps without realizing it, but when you look back and connect the dots, is we have respectively slalomed around our kind of mash-up career and reuniting, here we are all these years later. But I guess I'm just curious, David, about being really honest with ourselves about how much of that career has been consciously unplanning versus subconsciously unplanning. Because you've done a whole load of different things in your career, and I've done a whole load of different things in my career. We've pivoted over here, then gone over there, then gone over there. Now, looking back on it, it would be easy to say, oh, we unplanned our careers. But I'm just wondering how much of that is conscious and how much of that is unconscious or subconscious.
Well, Jonathan Bowman-Perks once said to me, you need to find your true north, which goes back to your compass. And I thought to myself, well, I think I live in a magnetic anomaly. My compass is always spinning.
Right.
This way and that. And my true north may be more difficult for me to find. But that said, I followed my values. And one of my values, I said, is innovation. But another one of my values is exploration. I love to explore. I went traveling when it wasn't popular for people to go traveling. And none of my friends at that time had been traveling, and most of them, I don't know if they ever did go traveling, but I went traveling and I had absolutely no plan. This is interesting, actually, because you've awoken in me something that I hadn't thought about. I went traveling in 1989. And the reason I went traveling is because a friend of mine had an accident in his van, and the insurance company paid for his van. And he said, I don't know what to do with this little van now. And I said, well, I'll buy it from you and I'll go traveling in it. And that was it. I bought this little van, had a dent in the back. I knocked the dent out and I loaded it with some provisions. I had no idea. When I got to France, when I landed in France, I wasn't sure if to turn left and head towards Germany or turn right and head out to the mountains there. And I turned left, and that was where the adventure began. And that took me a year and a half to return from there. And the moment I returned, I bought the next vehicle and went off to the Sahara to see what deserts were like. So this exploration in me, this willingness to explore, has always been a part of my makeup, not one of my values, which has driven me to explore in the parameters of areas where I think I can add value. If I can't add any value, like in diamond mining, I don't really try and go there and tell people what to do. But I can add value in lots of other places where I've learned about processes, about people, about systems, about technologies. I can add value in those places. So that's been a learning for me. Thank you for bringing that up, because that's the first time I've thought about that in my whole.
Well, I love that sense of exploration, and it echoes my own, perhaps not quite in an unplanned thing, but some of how I took a kind of coming of age exploration when I was 18, went around Europe by train. Didn't have quite the same sense of blank canvas as you did. So that's a really strong one for me. And yeah, unplanning my career is about embracing the explorer and sometimes not really being sure, where I go next. And I think, my narrative in my professional life for the last 20 years, since I walked out of the gates of 50 Lisson Street, where we both met in Marylebone, has been that I've never really known what's next. And I think I almost need to light that up in neon and have that on the wall here, because that's what we need right now. And it's funny how one can sometimes forget. I've just awoken that in your story. I need to constantly remind myself, especially here we are sitting in April 2020, we don't know what's coming next. We don't know when the schools are going to open their gates. I don't know when I'm next going to walk down to the station and get on a train to London again. I don't know when I'm next going to working for a big corporation, because at the moment all those things are on hold. And then I go, hang on a minute. My narrative for the last 20 years is I've never known what's coming next. It's been an adventure. And, oh yeah, so, maybe I'm good at this stuff. Or maybe I'm not good at it, but I'm used to it, right? I don't know. Is there a difference?
Yeah, there is. You're good at it because practice makes us good at it. We've had 20 odd years or more of doing this, and we've made all the mistakes. We've made, not all of them, we've made enough mistakes along the way, and we're smart enough to know that we need to learn from our mistakes and not see them as problems. The problem is never the problem, right? It's how we deal with the problem. That's what it comes down to. And then we're able to move forward from there. And we've had interesting lives, okay? That's true, right? And no one else knew what was coming next. They just hoped that tomorrow would be like yesterday. And it kind of has been. But you could go back 10 years and say we all woke up in a recession one day and the banks were Lehman Brothers collapsed. Yeah. Subprime mortgages. Most people had never heard of a subprime. I'd never heard of a subprime mortgage. And then I began to discover that the financial instruments of this world are weighted towards everyone else except me, it would appear. But all of us, yeah. And now, here we are 10 years down the road in the next one, where we're all, unfortunately, seeing so much suffering going on a global scale, not just in the Western economy, and people and health as well. None of us really know. But what agility has given us, that our values have given us, is that it doesn't bring fear or dread or panic. It just, it was the same. When I was traveling, I traveled through the former Yugoslavia. I think the interest rate was at 8,000%. So they were literally sticking tape on the end of the fuel pump to put all the zeros on.
Oh my gosh.
They were printing money. It was cheaper to use the printed money as toilet paper than it was to buy toilet paper, right? And I bought some cases of rum for like 50p a bottle or something. I had these cases of rum, and I ended up in Greece, and I was drinking with some Americans, and I got them drunk. And how some people just repeat themselves when they're drunk. This one American just kept saying, I can remember him saying, all he kept saying, repeating, was, go to Israel, man, get on a boat and go to Israel. Go to Israel, man, get on. And he just said that all night. I got up in the morning, and to shake these guys off, I drove down to the port, I got on a boat, I went to Israel. I'd never planned on going there in my life. I'd never even thought about going there. And it wasn't until I got there, I was like, wow, there's really some place called Jerusalem? I didn't even think it was real. So, so that sense of adventure, that unplanning, if that's one of your values, then great. But you may have other values that don't mean you can't be an unplanner. It doesn't mean you can't have that mindset going, what's in my scope? Because I can be agile, I can be fast within that scope. And another thing you mentioned is quickly and easily.
Yes.
I think, there's been points in your life where things have happened easily and things have not. Yeah. And I'm a big believer in persistence. I don't want people to just give up at the first hurdle, but sometimes things just seem to fall into place. easily. That's agility. That's part of that, isn't it? You find that you already have the skills to deliver on what someone asks. You find they're receptive to your idea.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that before, the easily thing, till I pulled that definition up. But I think you're right. And I think we were talking earlier about being rapid at responding to opportunities. And if I think about where I have responded to opportunities and made a success of them entrepreneurially, if I think about it, I think they were quite easy, in inverted commas, to to do. Early on in my career as an independent, I had this weird mix. I was managing a band, I was working for Benetton, I was writing a kids book with a friend of mine, and someone came along and said, look, I've got a lot of contacts in Parliament who need websites. Now, rather than me saying, well, I don't know anything about websites, I knew a guy that used to work for me, George, who knew all about websites. So I was like, oh yeah, well, George can do websites, but I'll kind of manage it. I'll be the go-between and I'll make some money on it. And sure enough, I was sitting in the House of Lords members bar, drinking a whiskey in the afternoon. I'm sure these times don't exist anymore. They shouldn't do anyway. With a peer in the House of Lords who said to someone else, "Oh yes, I'm getting myself a website." And I thought, how have I ended up here? But I'd just seen it, that there was an opportunity, and I had a fascinating afternoon sitting in the House of Lords members bar. But it was easy. I knew George, I could trust him. I wasn't learning to code. That would be another way forward. I could have learned to code. I didn't learn to code. It was, the early noughties, 2000, 2001. I was just like, here's an opportunity. Someone had said, I can introduce you all these parliamentarians. George on the website. So it was not on my radar. Suddenly overnight, I found myself in this space. But it was easy. Obviously, it needed confidence. It needed a lot of things to pull it off. Yeah, it wasn't on a plate, but it was easy. Yeah.
It was easy for you because your career up to that point had armed you to be able to manage projects, bring in people, understand briefs, articulate someone's messaging.
And drink whiskey in the afternoon.
You've always been an expert at that. Between my rum and your whiskey, we just had a couple of drunks.
Yeah. So yeah, easy. Yeah, we don't often talk about easy, do we? We talk about
life's tough. But it is. I think there's a point of difference, a point to make. Perhaps is that if something starts easy, that's fantastic. Take that as a signal that you are onto something. But if it then becomes difficult, plug persistence in at that point, because it's so easy. We've lived, because maybe the world is changing now, in this disposable world, where if something was a little bit broke, we threw it away. It didn't have to be fully broken. And it was interesting. 6 weeks ago, I'd said to my wife, hey, we'll replace the slow cooker, because one of us put it down on the gas stove, and the gas was on, and it melted the button that you used to set.
Right,
so,
yeah.
Little switch on the front. And I said, I'll get us a new one. They're only 20 quid. And I never quite got round to doing it. And we do use the slow cooker every once a week, a lamb cobbler. And last week, I said to my son, can you go and find a design out there somewhere and 3D print me a new switch for the cooker? Because we'll replace it. We don't need to replace the whole cooker because the switch is gone. Yeah, that's ridiculous. And, something's very easy to start and it starts becoming difficult, and put persistence in and push through. But if it feels like you're onto something, go with it. Don't just dump early. Persist. So I'm a big believer in persistence. I say we've grown up in this disposable environment where the slightest interruption and we have this built-in right to just dump. And I don't think that's right. I think the resilience and the persistence ultimately pays off. But if it's if the doors are all closed and you're trying to leave room open right at the beginning and you're not getting anywhere, then ask yourself, does this fit with your values? Is this going anywhere? If you just barked up a wrong tree here, which is fine, because then you learn from that mistake. And I think I could probably sit down and start listing things where I've tried to do it and I wasn't the guy for the job, and I learned quite quickly. And it's like you saying with the coding. If you'd have started trying to do coding, I think Ian Sanders could have learnt to code. Would Ian Sanders ever been as good at coding as he is at managing people, bringing events together, making things happen, motivating people, seeing a project through, articulating people's message? Would he be as good at coding as that list? No. So stick with your onions.
Yeah. That's reminded me. I love that story about your son and the 3D printing thing, because where do you think unplanning sits in creative thinking? You know, in ideation, in problem solving? Because I think sometimes there is this. What is there? It's almost like a expectation or a stereotype of like creative thinking is about kind of a planned process, and of course it's not, is it? You know, and I'm just curious about where unplanning sits in that whole thing of ideation and problem solving. What's your thought? What, you got any views on that?
Yeah. So what unplanners, people that are open to everything that's going on in and around them, are good at doing is spotting challenges, and not just spotting challenges, but recognizing the challenge and noting the challenge. The opposite of that is you ignore challenges and you either shout at them, or you just bury your head from them, or you run away from them, or you angrily deal with them. Right?
Yeah.
You, when you face a challenge, you square up to it, and that is where true creativity begins. All creativity starts with a challenge. If there is no problem, if there is no challenge, then what are you creating for?
Yeah. No,
and that could just be in your head. You could just be creating a painting, but your challenge could be, I want to capture the seascape on a wintry night. And you go out every night to try and see it until you see that perfect one, and you capture it and you paint it. It starts with the challenge. So unplanners aren't afraid to see the challenge. In fact, challenges are the unplanners' leverage for success. That is what gives true unplanners success. When someone says to you, I have this challenge, I have some peers in the House of Lords who can't get websites up, bingo, Ian's there. So I think the challenge, the unplanning, the beginning is around being able to spot that challenge, and then true creativity comes into play. And I know we've covered it before with the 5 steps to creativity. Step 1, what's the challenge? Recognize it.
I love that. Yeah, and we did talk about that in the episode before last. But I think, just to kind of recap on that a bit, because of course, unplanning in the how. You've been an executive creative director in an ad agency. We both worked together in an organisation which was a creative business, and there would be a meeting scheduled and diarised, as there are in thousands of organisations around the planet, where it's like, you're invited to we got a brainstorm session this afternoon in the boardroom to come up with ideas. And you and I, 25 years ago, went to a lot of those kind of sessions, and I don't think we necessarily challenged them at the time. But of course, with maturity and experience, we knew that no one ever had a meeting in the boardroom. You had it in the shower. You had it while you were cooking a stew. You had it while you were going for a run. And hopefully most organizations have awoken to that. But it does remind me of a story from that time about you and the lake. Do you want to tell that story, or shall I? It's about you.
You should tell it. It's about me. But before you do, I just want to clarify. Ian and I have never had a meeting in the shower together.
We could do, yeah. We haven't yet. No, I don't. I've got a shower. I don't think my shower's big enough. No, it's a story that I often tell because, of course, it doesn't come as a surprise to anyone that we don't have our best ideas in a boardroom. Yet, David in the mid-90s, or I wish I could put a better date on it, might have been earlier than the mid-90s, David was a very talented radio producer, quite a rookie one at that stage, and invited to sorry, not invited, he was instructed by his boss to spend a a day on some solo ideation, coming up with ideas to pitch Radio 1 for some pitching some program ideas. And then he was then told at the end of the week, everyone would come together in the boardroom to share their ideas. So David said, yeah, that's fine. And I want to go and sit by a lake to do it. You were living out in West London, David. You had a lake near you where I think you used to fish or go and do some things. And that was where you wanted to come up with ideas. Sitting here in 2020, of course, that'd be the perfect place. But in 1995, your boss, a lovely guy, said, don't be so ridiculous. You'll do it in the office. The same as everyone else. You left shortly afterwards, became an award-winning producer at Kiss FM breakfast show. So I think you were a bit ahead of your time, but of course that's the problem with too much planning and rigidity. The idea that to have an idea, you would sit in a production office or sit in a boardroom rather than go and engage in some other activities and see what your brain came up to. Back to your 5 principles of creative thinking. Yeah.
That is very true. Good ideas come after you've consumed a lot of information. So you've understood the challenge, you've consumed lots of information, you've got your first ideas out of the way, and then your brain will naturally go to work in a relaxed state of trying to solve the problem. We've talked about this before. The brain's brilliant at that. Look around us at all the challenges it's overcome, from my slow cooker all the way through to this call that we're able to make on these devices and share with other people. Now, all from the minds of people. All of that has come from the minds of people. None of it was dug up out of the ground. Yeah, the ideas came from the minds of people. So I guess we shouldn't underestimate that. To fuel those ideas, we need to make sure that we operate within the parameters of the way this machine up here likes to work. And I don't think when the brain was created and pieced together over evolution, it said a part of that should be that there should be a diarized timetable. Just don't think it existed. So why would I live in that world? Now, obviously, I'm not ridiculous, and I understand sometimes I have to do ideation at particular times with particular groups of people. So I have to do some little warm-ups for myself before I go in. But for the rest of it, hey, go and sit by a lake. Go let your mind wander. Let it do its thing and see where it takes us to overcome that challenge.
Amen to that. Well, look, I think we should wrap up there. This has been a great conversation as ever. I've learned a lot. It's lovely to revisit some of our stories, and I think the key point for me, I want you to tell me in a minute what you kind of key thing you've learned. The key thing I've learned, which I hadn't shone a light on before, is this thing about easy, the ability to move quickly and easily. And I wrote down here, David, if it's easy, take it as a signal. So that's my takeaway. What's yours?
So I've got to go back over some of my, you started to bring up about traveling, and I hadn't even realized how important those episodes were to the life I'm living now. My true north, I used to think of as this unstable magnetic field. I think I need to go back and look at myself and say, perhaps it was much more stable than you ever realized. So my takeout is, look back over your life and look for the common joining up, join the dots and enjoy that process. Even if it's only 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 dots, enjoy that process of joining them up. And when you join them up, I think you should celebrate it. I'm going to go away and have a flick through some old photo albums, I think, kind of go back to that and go, yeah, that was amazing. That's been part of me all the way through my life. And I only recognized it on this call.
Well, there you go. I'm glad we gave the opportunity of a reminder. So we're going to leave it there and see you next time. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Ian.